Hello, hello. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Amar, founder of ZenMade. Thanks for tuning in. Don't know why you're listening to this if you are not familiar with who I am. But today's topic, I wanted to go into a little bit about an incident that happened to me a couple of years ago. So those of you guys that know me personally will be aware that I broke my ankle quite badly a couple of years ago. And essentially today's episode, I wanted to talk about why I believe that in hindsight, if you fast forward maybe 10 years, maybe longer than that, that ankle break is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to my health. And I also wanted to share some of the mindsets and some of the things that I figured out along the way, in case I have any other friends in similar situations who might benefit from some of this stuff. So what happened? On May 14th of 2023, so 2.5 years ago, I was playing football, soccer for my American followers here in Brighton in the UK, where I'd actually just moved to the weekend before. So I'd been there for 8 days when this happened. Ball got kicked over my head. I was facing towards my own goal, and the ball was kicked over, essentially over my head towards the opponent's goal. And essentially, I followed the ball in the air and turned and accelerated to go after it, to bring it down like out of the air. And for whatever reason, my foot didn't come out of the ground when I did that, and so wasn't touched, wasn't tackled, nobody was near me, and I broke my ankle in 3 places and dislocated it. It's a turn that I've probably made playing football tens of thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times in my life. For those of you that didn't know me when I was younger, I used to play quite competitively for an American. So, preschool level in the UK or whatever, but I thought I was good back in the day, but I used to play a lot of football growing up. It was really like a big part of my identity. So yeah, just for what it's worth there. So the guys who I was with that day, I didn't know any of them personally, but they were quite helpful. In case this makes anyone feel any better, like how it sounds was much worse than how it felt in the moment. That it was like the idea of it is much more painful than it actually was. That's because thankfully, human bodies are amazing. And I think I just had like a rush of like adrenaline, and I definitely went into shock. But honestly, I don't remember it being that painful. I knew that something was severely wrong though. Immediately called my wife from the field, and the guys had to take away my phone because I just wasn't really making any sense trying to talk to her. So we called an Uber to get me over to the hospital rather than waiting for an ambulance. My wife, Fran, who actually had long COVID at the time, which is a completely separate ordeal. She came over to the hospital and met me. She got there a few minutes after me, looked at my ankle, went outside, and proceeded to pass out, which is my favorite part of the entire story. So all of that resulted in 19 straight days in the hospital in the UK in Brighton and 2 major surgeries. For my American friends, the bill was exactly $0, which is mind-boggling. But anyways, so that was essentially kind of what happened. Wanted to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of this episode. In case any of you guys are wondering why is Amar recording this now, 2.5 years after his injury, that's because my friend Charlie, who runs the amazing Ramen Space, a co-working space here in London, broke his leg in a bit of a freak accident a couple of weeks ago. So if you guys want to support him, you can join Ramen Space and maybe see me there working once a week or something like that. So anyways, say hello if you see me there. And Charlie, get well soon. So Like I mentioned, I wanted to talk through some of the things that had helped me through this entire thing, and just to give you guys like the current status on everything. Like I still can only walk in specific shoes that I can't wear my Vivo barefoots anymore for any amount of like time before I start getting quite bad like ankle pain. I still can't jog. I still can't run. And yeah, this is coming up on 3 years. The last time that I saw the surgeon at the beginning of this year, they were recommending me having one more surgery in the next maybe 6 months or so from the time of recording, if my ankle had not improved, and that has definitely not happened. So it looks like I'm going to need one more surgery to regain that like ability. And then just in terms of like life impact, like I think that even if I get another surgery and get this fully fixed, I doubt that I'm ever going to be playing football again. There's a couple of things that I'll talk about here more that just likely are not ever going to happen again. So there's a lot of like long-term like impact here, and for me it's like the stuff that I'm talking about will help anyone get through, I think, like any injury, but I just wanted to emphasize that like for me this is still very much like an ongoing journey, both in terms of like the physical recovery but also in terms of like mentally dealing and like coming to terms with the new reality. So that like segues nicely into the next section, which is essentially like a bit more about the first 90 days when I was out of the hospital and what we can kind of learn from that. But essentially like step one here is to adjust to the new reality, right? So you go from having this like mental image of yourself and goals and all of these different things that you're striving towards and that you're trying to achieve, and then in a split second, in my case, everything just kind of changes and all of the priorities change. All of my physical and fitness goals completely out the window. All of my business goals immediately like put on hold, right? So it was like the first thing was just adjusting to how many things you take for granted in day-to-day life that all of a sudden become challenges. So I had no elevator in the flat that I was living in the time that was on the third floor of an apartment block. And so that was something that once I essentially got up there, I think it was something like 2 weeks before I even left. And at the beginning, it was literally I could go down and up the stairs one time a day at the most. And that required a buildup in my head because it took that much effort. There were also things like around the house that at the beginning, getting up and doing anything more than essentially getting off the couch, where I would be elevating my leg pretty much 24 hours a day, getting off the couch to do anything other than use the bathroom was complete like agony and just absolutely exhausting at the beginning. And so one big thing was reframing and looking, like I always try to think of life in like little games, right? Like little games that we can like win, or that's how like I make a lot of things in life more palatable, right? And so realizing early on that, building up the energy to just get up and to go make a coffee or something like that, or do anything that wasn't using the bathroom, that almost became like my first goal, because it was literally like that exhausting. And a lot of it was just that any movement in my leg would cause a bunch of pain in my ankle. So it's like I had the energy, but maybe not I don't want to say perseverance or like persistence, but like, it can just be really, really draining, right? So that was something that like just like resetting kind of what success looked like, and just realizing that even though it sucks to just be like sitting on the couch with your leg up all day, you always have these little things that you can be striving for. And I think one of the really, really big kind of like lessons for me here that just made me appreciate, I feel like everyone else, is just like how much everyone is fighting their own battles. and that like you pick and choose like your battles that no one else like sees. And so for me, it was like getting up and making myself a coffee. Like the first time that I got up and did that and then made it back and didn't have to ask Fran for help was like such a great feeling, right? And if you have the right mindset, you can find that in all sorts of things in life. And I can tell you it's way more important when you're in times like this. So that was like a big thing. The other thing was just resetting the bar around like number one priorities. That we may have heard the saying of, a healthy man has, 100 priorities or 1,000 priorities. A sick man has but one. And so one thing for me was that resting became immediately my number one metric for success. That it was like, as much as I wanted to build up energy and to do more things, it was also the more time that I spent with my leg elevated, the more time that I was doing kind of the proper things that like the doctor had told me and not being like pushing my leg too much, the more that it was going to speed up the healing process. And so resetting the bar to make that one of my top like priorities was very important. That delves nicely into the next topic, which is sleep. So the other thing was that when it comes to the topic of resting, there was resting during the day, but then quality of sleep, and sleep is very, very difficult when your body is healing like this. Like I was in pain constantly and barely slept. At some point I realized that sleeping on the floor with my leg up on the couch was the best way and the least painful way to keep it elevated. And so for at least a couple of weeks I was doing that. But one of the big takeaways for me, or one of the big things, and one of the reasons that I said at the start of this episode that this is one of the best things to ever happen to me, is because the amount of effort that I had to put in to sleep, I've taken a lot of those things where previously I'd be like, oh, I'm sleeping just fine, I don't need to do anything else. Whereas now it's like every little thing that I can do to increase the quality of my sleep has me now 2.5 years on feeling way more rested than I ever did before this injury, simply because I have spent the time actually needing to focus on quality of sleep. And so like this injury was very much a forcing function there for me to clean up my sleep hygiene. So in terms of like ongoing like kind of like mindset wins, etc. So I'd mentioned about kind of reframing and just finding the small victories. So that's a continuous process that hopefully Charlie and other people that are going through this are going to have a much faster healing time than I did. That like it's possible, depending on what bone you broke, that it might be a 12-week recovery process. For me, my injury is so bad that it's probably never going to be fully like healed. But even within that, even today, I have these little small victories that I'm chasing. So like an example now is while I'm able to walk again and everything, and in many ways in day-to-day life, my ankle looks like it's kind of good. One of the places that it's not, that I know that it can get to without surgery, is that I struggle to lunge because I can't bend my big toe enough, because they removed quite a bit, like 30% of the muscle and tendon from the back of like my, between my calf and my heel. So like in my soleus area and the Achilles tendon, they had to remove a lot of that, which is connected directly to your big toe. And so right now, for example, on my right foot, my big toe mobility is nowhere near what it is on my left foot. That's something that I've never thought about in my entire life, right? Like big toe mobility, like that's just something that like I have, and like other people that I know have, and I've never thought about what it would be like to not have that. So right now, that is something that every time I go into the gym, I'm just, slowly like working away at that to try to just get it a little bit like more. And that's one of like the little victories that I'm focused on around my ankle right now. Thankfully, I am back in the gym and have been back in the gym for quite a long time. So I have plenty of other health goals that I can focus on. So a nice one there to bring up, or kind of like on that like topic, is really just like doing what you can. So for me, I got back into the gym far earlier than most people, where I went in when I was still on crutches and on a boot. I think I was out of the cast, but I was still like in a boot, and I was back in the gym and was like, needed a trainer to bring me the weights and stuff, and was hopping around on one leg. And that was just because for me, for my mind, I was just like, I just don't want to be a victim here. And so at some point, once I was healed enough, and you do have to wait until you're healed enough, or this will do more damage than it will like good, is I essentially just asked myself, if I just woke up every day like this and my ankle was never going to get any better than it was right now, what would I do? And the answer was, I would not be sitting there feeling sorry for myself. I would be in the gym doing pull-ups and just adjusting and just continuing to stay active, right? And so now, for example, I'm finally back to jujitsu, although it's a very modified version of jujitsu that like I can't start from standing. Any of my friends here who do jujitsu or wrestle or anything, if I got caught in any sort of single leg on like takedown on my bad ankle, I'd be putting myself in serious danger of re-injuring it. And so I have to start from sitting. Thankfully, jiu-jitsu lends itself to that. But for example, not being able to run has not been an excuse to not do cardio or to not, keep in decent shape like that. I've started taking up, like cycling, usually inside the gym. And so, that would be like one kind of ongoing adjustment. Okay, just going through my notes here. So, another big like kind of takeaway here with the ongoing journey is just focusing on small habits. I feel like so many of these things and these takeaways are things that like we all know and that we all should be doing, regardless of whether you've had an injury like this or not, or some sort of traumatic event like this. But having this sort of traumatic event just reminds you, or it reminded me at least, to just go back to the basics, right? It's like nail the fundamentals, and then you can stack these things back onto your life that you're used to having. So being insanely consistent with these things was the most important thing that I could do for the healing of my ankle. And then once the ankle kind of got a bit better, it really just reminded me of the power of these like tiny habits that you do. And so I just kept stacking on more in a way that I hadn't before. So really, this like created a positive feedback loop, and that consistency in small things, it was something that I took back to ZenMate and took back to the business. There's two books that I actually read. I don't know if I'm even recommending these, but like I read them at a very transformative time in my life. But I think it's like 1%. I forget what the name of the book is. There's The Compound Effect. I believe it's by Jeff Hardy or something. And then there's another one that's pretty much like, it was almost like these two books came out at the same time with the exact same concept. So one is The Compound Effect. The other might be like 1% better or something. I'll see if I can find that and include it like in the notes. But yeah, essentially everything that I'd learned in those books just like came flooding back into my head while going through this experience. So I'd already mentioned about metrics changing and about like how you have to pick different metrics, that if you have some sort of injury like this and you continue to keep your goal of like doing a handstand, for example, you're just going to end up miserable and frustrated. And so you have to figure out where you are and then reset your metrics so you can begin to stack little wins on top of each other until you get back to health and then get like beyond it, right? So like my goal, even if I don't get back to football, but assuming that the next surgery goes well, my goal is going to be to get my ankle to stronger and healthier than it was before the break. That's like the expectation, or what like I'm going for. And I don't know if I will get there, but I do think that you have to have that sort of attitude in order to really like, kind of like make it back and to like kind of make the most and not let this be a permanent like setback. I've also already talked about redefining kind of like your identity along with like new metrics and like new goals. But for me, for example, I've always thought of myself as being like a footballer or being like an athlete, right? And so I do think that's just more of like a mentality than anything, and it's more reflective of kind of who I was when I was younger. But I think it's a very healthy sort of mentality to bring to things. So in terms of like being a footballer, that's kind of out the window, right? It's like I had all sorts of like visions in my future of, playing football with my kids and teaching them these different things. And I can still like teach them things and everything, but like I don't think that I'm going to be playing with them the way that I had envisioned maybe like in the past. And so that was honestly like a pretty difficult one to kind of deal with. On the flip side, my identity of being an athlete, I feel like, was almost reinforced here, where it was just like professional athletes have setbacks like this all the time. Jack Wilshere had a terrible ankle break that doctors were, surprised he made it back to playing from, if you listen to some of his interviews and stuff. And so I did set that goal initially of it's like, I'm going to try to get back to playing football, and that's going to be the goal. I have realized since that the injury was much worse than I had initially anticipated. Like I've mentioned already, they removed 30% of the tendon and muscle. That wasn't from the injury. That was because the first surgery that I had, it took them so long to rebuild and restructure my ankle that some of the tendon and muscle died from lack of blood flow during the first surgery. So the second surgery kept getting put off because they had to have like a plastic surgery team on site in case they had trouble kind of closing up like the wound because of how much they had done. So when I saw my doc after, who was amazing by the way, when I saw my surgeon after maybe 12 months or something, he said that he's currently using the restructuring of my ankle as a case study to teach his medical students. So that's like how bad of a break it was. But like I said, I'm still thinking about myself like as an athlete, and like as an athlete, like the nice thing is that like I just want to keep doing things that are active and fun and all of that stuff. It doesn't have to be like something specific. And so that's allowed me to adjust a lot where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to be playing football or anything running again, but I plan on kayaking more, like I did in Norway recently. I plan on doing like paddle boarding, although I still need to try that for the balance and see how that actually is. I'm planning on doing adjusted like jujitsu. I'm obviously like walking a ton, all that stuff. So, these are all things like that like I've had to apply or, keep in mind or like sometimes force as like my self-identity to kind of keep myself going during this whole ordeal. All right, I feel like I've been talking for quite a while now. This is going longer than the first time I recorded this, but hopefully is a little bit better organized than that shit show. So you guys are welcome that I'm re-recording this and publishing this version and not the one that I tried recording about an hour ago. Okay, cool. So to like wrap this up, I did say at the beginning that I do genuinely believe that this ankle break is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to my health, despite the fact that I'm likely never going to play football again, maybe never run again. Like we'll see with that. But I think that the big reason for this is because it really just woke me up and it gave me kind of a preview into almost what old age is going to be like. And there were plenty of things that like when your ankle is really bad and then like your quad on like your left leg all of a sudden starts getting more tired than you feel like it should when going up the stairs and stuff. All of a sudden it really emphasized to me of like, hey, like if I had been in way better shape when this ankle break had happened, like first of all, maybe it wouldn't have happened if I was in like better shape. But even if it had happened, I would be having such an easier time moving myself around on crutches right now. I'd be having so much of an easier time just really doing like anything or having to rely on the rest of my body to make up for this. And so it almost makes me think of like with Navy SEALs and stuff, it's like occasionally they'll just be like, cool, this guy in your squad during a drill is dead. And now everyone needs to chip in and to carry this guy and all of his weight through this thing that was already really, really tough to do, like on your own with the gear that you're already carrying. Right. And so it's just upping the standard, where it's like when your standard is that you're going to do all of these things with your friend on like your back, that I feel like that's almost a helpful way of thinking about like my future self. Right. Where it's just like the better shape that I can be in physically, and the better that I take care of myself now, the easier life is going to be going forward. And like, it's not even about being easier, it's just about living like a higher quality of life. So a couple of like specific health habits that breaking my ankle has helped me to adapt, to create, to bring into my life is I've started taking much more of a mobility focus, that losing all mobility in one of your joints will have a tendency to make you hyper aware of your mobility everywhere. And just for clarity here, mobility is kind of strength through range or strength through length. So it's different than flexibility, where it's like I'm trying to be strong in as wide a range of motion as possible. And that's because right now, what is an unbelievably like basic or normal part of my range of motion for my left healthy ankle is completely impossible for my right ankle. So that's been interesting, but it's been really good. I've been doing a lot more yoga classes and stuff like that, that I'd never done before, and they've been great, and they're something that I'm planning on sticking with. I fixed up my diet. That's because to avoid putting on weight when I wasn't able to move for months on end, the only way to do that was by fixing my diet. So I have let go of that a little bit and need to kind of like get on it. But I did spend time learning to cook and to prepare things that were healthy at home, because it was one of the few ways that I was able to exhibit kind of control on like my life during this time. Another one would be movement snacks, that before I was able to go into the gym, or when it was just too tiring to go into the gym on a regular basis, because initially just going to the gym, literally getting there, was a massive like workout the first time or two that I went. I started incorporating movement snacks kind of into my day, and so I had a pull-up bar, I had dip bars, and maybe a kettlebell that I was able to use like eventually, but I essentially just started doing a couple pull-ups, a couple of dips, just like throughout the day to stay active. This would be a couple of months after the injury actually like happened, and that's something that I've kept doing. And now that I'm back in the gym as well, it's actually nice to see how that's positively impacting things ongoing. This ankle break did lead me to make quite a bit more investment in my health. So I started working with a personal trainer, Josh, who is down in Brighton, who I'm looking forward to working with again, like in the future. He did a great job of like adapting to kind of where I was currently at, but more importantly, he really just made things fun for me that I looked forward to going in. And even though I couldn't do like all that much at the beginning, I really enjoyed the time going into the gym, and that was very, very helpful in terms of like keeping me there, making progress, like all of that stuff. I also started seeing a great physio, Mark, down in Brighton as well, and he's someone who I plan on continuing to see in the future, even when the ankle isn't the primary like issue or the primary thing that's maybe holding me back. I already mentioned sleep and how it's kind of forced me to optimize that. Also, I don't know how much this was actually related to it, but maybe it was just like kind of the increased health focus. I've started sauning a lot more as well, which has been good. And then the last one in terms of health habits is I feel like this injury has just really removed like all excuses for me, that it's just kind of like a forced adaptation thing now, where like jujitsu is a great example of how I can't do some of the stuff. I mean, the most basic thing that we start with the warm up is jogging around the mats, and I literally can't do that, which is kind of hilarious. But I just feel like with the ankle, it's kind of like, this is where I'm at. Nothing I'm going to do is going to change it today, even though like I can work on improving it and everything. And so I just need to go and do what I can and not make any excuses. And again, like all of these things have really like helped me also like professionally, of like most of these things mindset wise are a great thing to bring to your business and everything. And so yeah, the forced adaptation and just doing like what you can. And so the last thing is kind of the same thing as what I just said, but it's just focusing on the locus of control, right? It's that when some sort of traumatic event happens like this, you're going to immediately lose control of quite a few things in your life that you're used to, and for very good reason, you're used to having full control over, like your schedule, for example, right? Or your ability to work out, or your ability to work, right? And all of these different things. And so being able to quickly kind of accept where you're at, it's like a stoic kind of like principle, and just bringing your focus down to, these are the things that I can change that actually improve my situation. The faster that you can get down to that, the easier I think that this is to all get through. So cool. Couple quick shout outs before I jump off here. Like every podcast, I want to give a shout out to my mom. Also shout outs to Kate Hill, who I know from the Dynamite Circle. I don't know if her course is bestbrokenleg.com, but Kate is a personal friend of mine, and she broke her leg maybe 6 months before I broke my ankle, and she wrote up something that honestly, I really should have taken a look at before this. I'm sure that a lot of things that I've said here were things that she passed on to me, but she actually put together a little course that I believe it's called bestbrokenlegever.com, and it's essentially about going in with the mindset of like, this sucks, but how am I going to make this the best experience ever? And so I really appreciate her. Wanted to shout out my friends Rami and August Ryan. Those were the two friends I remember. I think there were a couple more that came and visited me in the hospital. And then, of course, for Charlie, who I hope is still listening and hasn't tuned out. But yeah, I hope you get better, bud, and we get to see more of you soon. So a final call to action here is just, if you are going through something similar to this, if you have just broken a leg, limb, something like that, and you want to drop me a message, I'm always available. You can find my email online. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. Don't hesitate to reach out. The mindset stuff, I feel like, translates to lots of different things, and I've started helping some people around that stuff. So not that this is anything that would be paid or anything, but just, yeah, if you've had something like this and you need someone to run things by or whatever, I am available to you, my loyal listener. So, all right, guys. I'm going to stop talking now. Thanks for listening, and I will see you guys on the next one.